let me introduce the next person on the list with the following. This particular individual is absolutely in a league by himself. He's unique in every way. He merits special attention. In fact, I can tell you the writer of Hebrews actually recognizes this. There's a reason he actually invests 10 times the ink that he does with any of the other men, and he mentioned in Hebrews 11. In other words, he spends roughly 10 times the amount of time talking about this one in comparison to any of the other men. So this is a guy that we want to pay attention to. There's a heavy emphasis upon him, and that is Abraham. I want to open up today by taking you to the Apocrypha, going back to that structure, the very same type of structure that the writer of Hebrews is using in chapter 11. It's kind of the sister of it by going to Sirach. And I want to show you how Sirach opens up in regard to Abraham to get a feel for just how special this one is. He says this: Abraham was the great father of a multitude of nations, and no one has been found like him in glory. That's a weighty statement. The writer is very clear of all the righteous men that have lived, and yet he puts Abraham in a category all by himself. What makes Abraham so special? I'll tell you. Heritage, identity, promise, inheritance. All of these things is what makes Abraham so special. In fact, what you realize when you go to John chapter 8 is as the Jews, they're dialoguing with Yeshua, they name drop. They're talking to him and they drop the name. Do you know who we are? Abraham is our father. They take their identity back to him. We're descendants of Abraham. Do you know what that means to be a descendant of? It means you're somebody. You're not just anybody, you're chosen. Those promises that were given to Abraham, they're yours. The blessings that are given to Abraham, they're yours if you're his descendants. The inheritance that was promised to him, that's yours if you are Abraham's. Now it gets even better because what we discover is this whole thing is not confined to the Jewish physical descendants of Abraham. But this honorable blessing would extend to the entire world. And we see this in Genesis. No longer shall your name be called Avram, but your name shall be Abraham, for I have made you a father of many nations. God himself comes and changes his name to adapt to what he would do through Abraham. No other man can make this claim, what God does through Abraham, but Abraham alone. You know, in 2002, every time I talk about Abraham, this always comes to my mind, but in 2002, I saw Time magazine, and on the cover, it said this. It said Abraham, and then the subtext reads, Muslims, Christians, and Jews all claim him as their father. Now you think about this. Let's put this into context for a second. If you take Islam, Christianity, and Judaism, do you know right now the numbers are well over 4 billion people right now living today. Over 4 billion. You know, there's only 7.8 billion people on the earth. You know what that means? That means 1 out of every 2 people is proclaiming Abraham as their father. 1 out of every 2 people in this world. Think about that. Is this what the text of Genesis is talking about? Because he was to be this father of many nations. What you won't see in the text is that he would be the father of many religions. He would be the father of many nations, but not the father of many religions. So the question becomes, who are Abraham's children? Paul raises this issue, and he answers it. Therefore, know that only those who are of faith are sons of Abraham. Only people of faith are sons of Abraham. Now, if I was to just isolate this statement, I could just take what is said here, lap off the Galatians quote, just take Paul's words. I could stick them on Islam because Islam believes, they believe you have to believe. You have to have faith. There's no other way. I could take this into Judaism. Judaism will tell you the same thing. You have to have faith. There's no other way. I can take this into Christianity. They'll tell you the same thing. So what is Paul referring to? Because he is very specific. Look at what he says here. He says in verse 29, if you are Christ, then you are Abraham's seed and heirs according to the promise. That's how we know. It is very specific on how to define who really is a child of Abraham, because everyone's claiming him as their father. Now take this and bring it into Islam. How does that work? Take this and bring it into Judaism. How does that work? I want to take this a step further, because this is the next passage I'm going to show you really is significant for the totality of today's message, where we get to see Abraham's faith, what Abraham's faith really looked like, and what faith is scripturally, defining it. And typically, you've heard me use this term. I like to use it, structure of the faith, meaning faith is not simply a concept that stays in my head. No, it has obedience. It has action. That's how we know we have true faith. And so listen to Yeshua's words. He says this. They answered and said to him, the Jews, Abraham is our father. This is their identity. And Yeshua said to them, if you were Abraham's children, you would do the works of Abraham. So genetically speaking, and this gets into genetics, we need to know, genetically speaking, do we belong to Abraham? That means you have to step back and say, do I look like Father Abraham? Do I bear his characteristics? You know, when you have children, your children bear the characteristics. It's genetics. You've heard a story, a tragic story at some point in your life, and I actually just heard one not that long, a couple months ago, but I've heard several over my lifetime, where parents have lost their child at a very young age, 2, 3, 4, 5 years old, to child abduction or to some other way. They've lost their child. And still 15 plus years later, they're being very proactive. They're still looking for their child. Rightfully so. You can see this, right? Well, you see these stories where someone comes in, they read this story and says, I'm going to go and I'm going to claim them as my parents. And they do. This happens. They come and they do this. But then they do a paternity test. Then they check the genetics and they say, you are not ours. Now you may say, well, that's really demented. Someone would do that. But I want you to think about, why would they do that? Why are they seeking to do this? I'm going to tell you. Because they see the benefits of it being able to be associated with these parents. Whether financial or emotional, they want to be part of that house. And what I'm telling you is there's going to be a lot of imposters, and there are a lot of imposters that say, we are part of Abraham and Sarah. We are part of their house. Make no mistake, there's going to be a test done. The genetics are going to be determined. And it is whether you have faith in Yeshua and whether you are keeping his commandments or not. That's the genetic test. It's going to come out. You're not going to be able to avoid it. You can't fool your way through this. You're not going to be able to pretend. It will only go so far. With that said, I want to break into Hebrews chapter 11. This is what we read. By faith, Abraham obeyed when he was called to go out to the place which he would receive as an inheritance. You know what's interesting to me is the writer doesn't start with that prolific passage that we all know in Genesis 15:5 going into 15:6. Where God, he brings Abraham outside and says, hey, look at the stars of heaven. Count them if you're able to number them. So shall your descendants be. And then in verse 6, it says, Abraham believed God, and it was accounted to him for righteousness. Abraham believed in his heart. There's nothing else behind it. It's just simply him looking at the stars, God saying what he said, and God peered into his heart, and he recognized Abraham actually believes me. Now, one would think that the writer of Hebrews would begin there. He doesn't. He actually begins back in Genesis 11. I want to take you back there. And we're going to really appreciate what Abraham's faith really looks like. And this is what we read. This is the genealogy of Terah. Terah begot Avram, Nahor, and Haran. Haran begot Lot. And Haran died before his father Terah in his native land in Ur of the Chaldeans, the Kasdim. Okay, now, something that you need to understand right here. Abraham's native hometown, where his ancestors dwelt, was in Ur of the Chaldeans. Why is this significant? Do you know what this land is called also in the Bible? Babylon. This is Babylon. His hometown, where his ancestors dwell, where he is dwelling, is Babylon. Isn't that interesting? So as God is calling Abraham out, he's calling him out of Babylon, literally. And this gets interesting when we see the entire world has received this calling. I heard another voice from heaven saying, "Come out of her, Babylon, my people, lest you share in her sins and lest you receive of her plagues." The very same calling that was given to Abraham is being declared today in the gospel of the Messiah, Yeshua. The very same call. And it's interesting, those who are Abraham's children, they will do as Abraham did. They will heed the calling, and they will come forth.
Hey there, this is Mike at Corner Fringe Ministries. Thanks for watching our video. If you liked the video or it encouraged you, do us a favor. Hit the like button. Don't forget to hit the share. And if you haven't done so already, please hit the subscribe button. Now, if you want to watch the rest of this video, hit the button here. And if you want to watch the rest of this series, you can check it out here. And don't forget, you can download the Corner Fringe Ministries app today on any of your Play stores. Thanks for joining us at Corner Fringe Ministries.